This Speakeasy podcast, the behind the scenes of what it is to be the successfully paid speaker and author. I am your host, Altovise Pelzer, the voice coach, professional speaker, certified life coach, Amazon bestselling author and podcaster, and founder of the World Voice League, a community of entrepreneurs, speakers, and authors coming together to impact social change. So with that being said, guys, how have you been doing? We're literally past the halfway point in first quarter. We are about to hit March, literally at the end of this week. How have you been doing in your revenue as a speaker? Have you brought in any revenue as a speaker? Have you done any speaking events? Have you done any interviews? This is your opportunity to start putting some things down. So I need you to get a pen and a paper. Don't be scared. They will not hurt you. Well, you could get a paper cut, and they kind of sting a lot. But other than that, outside of a paper cut, the pen and paper will not hurt you. So I need you to go get one of those and write some things down, because oftentimes we are so great with having ideas in our head and thinking of some great things that we can do. We never put them on paper, and so they never come to reality. We don't put any action steps with it. We don't do any of that. So I'm about to hit it and hit it hard, right? So if you have not done so already, make sure that you share out this particular episode, because somebody may need this information. That part, sharing is caring. So that part, of course, is so very important. But let's dive into today's topic. So of course, I'm in the middle of, or we're about to end the World Voice Summit, which has been a 28-day, literally international virtual summit, almost 100 speakers from all over the world. Yesterday, we had Australia on. The day before, we had New Zealand. We've had Scotland, Hong Kong. People from all over the world have come together to educate and empower. But it also brought me to a couple questions that were being asked of me by my clients, as well as some of the people who were on the summit. And they were, the big question was, how do I increase my revenue as a speaker? Because, everybody thinks that when it comes to being the paid speaker, it just means that the platform you're speaking on is paying you to speak. And that's not the only way that you can increase your revenue. Sometimes it's about that E-word exposure. Other times it's about your sales. Are you making the conversions? Or do you even have stuff to sell? All of this plays a really big part in you increasing your revenue. But I wanted to talk specifically about 5 skills that I've seen that help increase revenue as a speaker, that people most times will bypass or try to skirt around and not really focus in these areas. And every time that I've seen somebody not focus in these areas, they kind of become, they reach that ceiling of only getting paid when somebody pays you to speak. But they don't know how to sell from the stage. They don't know how to convert. They don't know, what opportunities are out there for them to be able to sell more. They don't know any of those. And this is not even about the creation part, the creating your content and having a digital store. Most of you as speakers do not have a digital store. Most of you as entrepreneurs don't even have a digital store. And I don't know why you don't. You're missing some key elements by not having a digital store. But we'll talk about that in a moment. I need you to grab a hold of that pen and paper and get ready to write these things down. First and foremost, what was your profit plan for 2019? Don't worry, I'll wait. What was the amount that you put on paper that you said, 2019, I'm going all in. This is what I'm making. This is what I'm going to do. I'm not holding back. Boom, I want this. What did you put down? Did you even do a profit plan for 2019? You should have. And you probably didn't have a coach, which is probably why you didn't. But we're going to move past that point and say that you need to write down an amount that you want to make for this year. Listen, I understand we want to dream big and everybody wants to make 7 to 8 figures. I get that. That's the whole trend right now. 7, 8, 10 figures. I get it. But realistically, How much do you need to take care of your bills and your family, to live comfortably, to be able to take care of an emergency if something happens? How much do you need? That part, right? That part. I'm not going to go into the whole profit planning piece, but I will give you guys information. If you go to my digital store, bit.ly/myvoice, there's actually a profit planning training there that you can access to help you plan that whole thing out. We're not going to do that in this episode, but I need you to have a number in place. Now, let's start with number one. Are you sharing? Do you have a key brand story or some key brand stories so people get to know you? One of the ways that you go and you are able to increase your revenue is when people get to know who you are and they learn your story. And what happens is when you're telling your brand story resonates with people. That's what makes them want to buy your books. That's what makes them want to be in your courses. Because if you were able to go through what they're going through right now and you made it, then they want to grab with both hands access to what it is that you were able to do. Most of you don't even have those things in a program yet. Again, if you have not set that thing up yet, I don't know what's going on. But most people were going to want to grab a hold of that. They want that information. No holds barred. They don't want you to sugarcoat it. They don't want you to play around with it. That's cute. No. They want to know what it is that they can go and access and do and be able to make more money themselves or get out of their bad relationships or change their habits or find their purpose, whatever it is that you do. They want to know that thing. And if you're saying, well, maybe I do a product instead of a service, well, guess what? You still should be speaking because there's somebody that wants to know why you started selling that product. There's somebody that wants to know, what were the hard times when it came to creating that product and putting that product up there. They want to know, what's the journey like? Was it all positive? Did you have some negatives? So again, people want to know your brand story. They want to know what it is that got you to where you are. Now, the issue comes in is that a lot of people don't realize the ways to craft a brand story. Again, I'm not going to go into that 100%. I would love to chat with you more. You can get on my calendar at bit.ly/talk to Altovise to chat a little bit better about, what you need when it comes to profit plans and brand stories if you need help. But you definitely need a brand story. That's one of those skills that help you to increase your revenue. Takes you to number 2. Tell your trip story. Now, I'm not talking about your vacation. I'm not talking about your vacation story. I'm talking about the time where you tripped and fell, or you almost fell, but you caught yourself in midair, or you fell and skinned your knee, or you fell and you sprained your wrist. Now, I'm saying it in the literal sense, but I mean in your business. What was that moment where you tripped up and almost fell, where something didn't go right, where, oh my goodness, something fell apart, and you had to get back up with some bruised knees, maybe a bruised elbow, you hit that funny bone that really isn't that funny, that part. What is that story, that trip story? People often get nervous when it comes to telling people their trip story, simply because they feel as though if I tell you my trip story, then what's going to happen now is you're not going to think that I'm good enough to be your coach. That if I tell you and be transparent about what it is that I've messed up on, then now you're going to see me as someone who's less than someone that you need to pay. Now, granted, there's going to be some people that may walk away. That's okay. They weren't your client anyway. But the ones who want to have success, they're going to want to invest in what it is that you're saying. That part, that goes back to that profit plan, that goes back to that marketing strategy, that goes back to that brand story. Yes, your trip story can be a part of your brand story, but then it can be something that you learned after those life lessons that you had in your brand story that really allow you to connect with your audience. And when you connect with your audience, what is that? Building the know, like, and trust factor, so that way they can say, hey, I want you to speak at my event. Hey, I want you to come and be a part of this opportunity. Hey, I want to work with you one-on-one. I want to be in your coaching program. That is how you get that done. That takes me to number 3 is, listen, this is a skill. Sometimes we got to get off of our squiggles. And we got to search some things out. Why is this a skill? Because I see so many people that go and say yes to opportunities, and they haven't really done the research on what opportunities are out there. Like literally, no matter what business you're in, there are opportunities to speak just for your brand, just for your genre. Listen, if you are a cow herder, a sheep herder, there are conferences for sheep herders and cow herders where you can go and speak. It's still a paid opportunity or can lead to paid opportunities. You gotta shift your mindset. Now, granted, if you're somebody who's building a website, going to a sheep herder convention is not really your forte unless you're working with building websites for sheep herders. That part. But outside of that, do the research, guys. It pays to do the research. One of the things that I did with the World Voice Summit was that I went and I sought people out. I sought out other speakers. I connected and collaborated with speakers that have been on my podcast. I've connected and collaborated with speakers that I've been at events with, that I've spoken at events with, and I connected with them. And that's who were on the podcast. That's who were a part of the summit. You got to seek it out, though. If I only would have relied on putting a post out there or a flyer and saying, hey, come join my program. Hey, come be a speaker. Instead of me going and actually seeking people out, I would not have had the amazing return that I had. And I had some phenomenal speakers on this summit. 80 plus speakers from all over the world. New Zealand, Hong Kong, Scotland, Canada, Virgin Islands, Barbados. Oh my goodness, guys, listen, people from all over came and were a part of it, but it was because I sought them out. I sought out opportunities to connect with them in different ways. Some of those opportunities may be free Facebook groups, free at LinkedIn groups. There's many opportunities for you out there, for you to speak or for you to collaborate and connect with other speakers and other podcasters and things of that nature. That part, that is a skill. That is a skill. That is a skill. Another skill that will help you to add revenue to your bottom line as a speaker is create your own platform. The World Voice League and the World Voice Summit, I created those. Like, magic dust, unicorn. I created those. So why? Because they were platforms that I did not see other speakers doing, that I did not see other hosts putting together. So I put the platform together. What do you mean? I put it together. I created what I did not see. This is a skill. I'm going to tell you why. When you are creating something on this level, at this capacity, what ends up happening most times is people get frustrated. They realize how much time and energy they needed to put into it after the fact. And now they quit. They do a tour one time and get frustrated and don't do it ever again. They do an event one time, get frustrated and never do it again. And then they're running around and they're trying to figure out, why am I still doing this? I'll just go and do it on somebody else's platform. Why? You can do your own. Or if you are going to work on somebody else's platform, it's a great opportunity for you to learn and grow. Something that I told my team was, get in there. Go ahead, feel this thing out, see what it is like from all different angles. Be a presenter, be the host, be behind the scenes. I want you to see this from all different angles, because guess what? I want you to be able to create and recreate when it comes to your brand and what you're going to do. So my team was a part of my summit, in front of the camera and behind. And guess what? Within the next 30 days, they're each going to be able to go out and do their own summit and put it on and learn from the things that went well with the summit, the things that didn't go well with the summit. Hey, look, 28 days straight, 80 plus speakers, not everything goes right. There are some things that went way left, and that is okay because we learned from the process. Now, the other piece of that is that when you're creating, you also have a better respect for somebody else's platform. So now I've put myself in a position to when I go and I'm on somebody else's platform as a speaker, I serve first. I know what it's like behind the scenes. I know what they go through. I know what they endure. So now I'm coming forward with that mindset. Now they not only are excited to have me as a part of their platform, but they're also inviting me to other, they're talking about me to other people. They're inviting me to other opportunities simply because I showed up and showed out because I already knew what it took. I already knew that they needed my information. I already knew that they needed me to show up at least a couple minutes early, or that there may be some things going on and we may be going past time a couple minutes late. I knew those things. And when you know those things, then you won't be so quick to get frustrated by what's going on. You won't be so quick to underestimate the validity of somebody's dream and somebody's platform. You have to understand what's going on behind the scenes, and creating your own opportunity is a great way to do it. Also, you get to learn when you're paying for an investment, you get to learn what that payment goes to. I have a team that works behind the scenes. I have a team that was in people's inboxes and emailing people out. I have a team that was doing these amazing things. Why? Because that team knew we got things to do. We got things to do. So yes, I applaud everything that you're doing. Yes, but we have things to do as well. And again, you get to learn from behind the scenes. Always great for you to go and volunteer. I tell people, before I was speaking on stages, I was volunteering at events. I was speaking in youth ministry. I was volunteering at events. I was volunteering at my church events. I was volunteering. I was behind the scenes. I was looking and seeing what it took to put together a successful event, the invites that go out, the building relationships, all of those things. I was there helping to set up and closing down. Before everybody else got there and afterwards, I would take the extra initiative to be able to be in the room. Some of you have lost that art of showing up and being in the room. And I get it. I understand. It's not always easy. I understand. But when we're in the room, guess what happens? We get the opportunity to meet other people who are in the room as well. That part. Create the opportunity, show up at other people's opportunities. Do what you need to do for you to be successful. And that leads me to number five. And that's the podcast interviews. Yes, interviewing on a podcast is a skill. Why? Because there are some things that you need to do in order for it to be a successful podcast interview. Here's the thing. I get people all the time that will go and sign up for an interview and not show up. I get people that show up for, or that will sign up for an interview, and then they wait until the day of or the last minute to ask questions. And the day of, I already have 9 different things going on in my head. So I'm not checking emails every 15 minutes. I'm not, going and searching out to see if you're going to show up today or if something happened. You got to understand that when you go and you're on somebody's platform, you got to respect the platform, but you also got to have a strategy. When you go to a platform and you're invited to be a guest, what are you there for? I'm there to present myself to another audience, build that know, like, and trust factor in a small allotted amount of time, because you have some podcasts that only run for 15 minutes. You have some podcasts that are a half hour, an hour. So I'm showing up to build that know, like, and trust factor. Remember, we talked about in number 1 and number 2, tell your trip story, have your brand story. Those things are key when you're going and doing podcasts. But now I got to understand, how am I adding them to my email list? How am I bringing them from out of that audience into my own audience? Those things are important. So I got to have a strategy. It's a skill to being a guest on a podcast. Now, granted, I get guests all the time. I'm going to give you, now remember I told you should be writing these things down, but I'm about to give you some hot sauce right now when it comes to podcasting, where you could be taking that podcast and blowing up your own spot, blowing up that podcaster spot, only if you knew what to do. You ready? I'm going to go quick. So make sure you're writing these down. Number one, what are you doing with the replay of the podcast? Listen, podcast interviews are evergreen. As long as that podcaster never takes it down, as long as that podcaster never deletes it, it's there forever. That's something that you can put into your emails. That's something that you can put on your website. That's something that you can put on your social media sites. What are you doing with these interviews? I've done numerous interviews over the years. And at any given time, I'll share out the link. I'll go back and take clips from the interview and share that out with the flyer. Guys, there's so many opportunities. Understand that it starts with you respecting the platform, though. Go make sure that you're ready to take full advantage of the opportunity. So number one is, what are you doing with the replay from that interview? Number two is, okay, now I know what I'm doing with the replay from the interview. What am I doing as far as that podcaster? How am I going to go and, how am I paying it forward for that podcaster? The great way for me to pay it forward for the podcaster is I'm sending out their podcast link and information to my email list. I'm sharing out the flyer to their podcast. I'm sharing out the information to their podcast over on my platforms, on my social media sites. Why? That builds up that podcaster as well as myself. Now, this is the thing. People always go on and I guess you feel as though that if you show up for a podcast, that it's kind of like, oh, I'm a big deal. Well, great. That's cute. But I need you to understand that it should be a big deal for both. It should be a win-win for you and the podcaster, not just for you. So make sure that you're sending that information out. That brings us to number three. Now, this is a secret sauce stuff that I tell my guests. After you're done a podcast or while you're doing the podcast live, go live. Go live while you're on that podcast and record it. Ask the podcaster first, but go live. Share it out. Let people know, hey, I'm live doing the Speakeasy podcast. I'm live doing the Reinvention Radio podcast. Whatever you're doing, listen, go live. Tell people what podcast you're doing, because it's a way for you to tag that podcast host, and put it out there. It's social proof for not just you, but for the podcaster. So you're either going live while you're doing the podcast, right before you do the podcast, or right after you do the podcast. So many times we're trying to fit so much stuff in that we forget it's the little things like this that really help take us to a whole new level. Because guess what? That's what it's about. It's about taking your podcast to a whole new level. I want you to grow as a speaker, but guess what? You should want me to grow as well, because the more exposure my podcast gets, the more exposure your interview gets. So for instance, my podcast, the Speakeasy podcast, just made it to number 12 a few weeks back, made it to number 12 on the iTunes list. That meant, and literally, I think like within that week, I had like a couple hundred downloads. That meant that you had an opportunity to have your interview downloaded by somebody who were just coming in and learning about my podcast because it was up in the top 12. Guess what? If you weren't somebody that was sharing it out during that time, like you saw that podcaster was like, hey, I just made it to number 2, number 5. That's your opportunity to say, hey, look, I was on this podcast and they just made it to number 2 on the iTunes list, or number 10 on the iTunes list. That's a way for you, again, to go and pay it for that podcaster get your brand out there, but it also generates more revenue for you because people will do what? Listen to the podcast, find out who you are, and come and seek you out. So with that being said, guys, those were my hot tips I had for you for building revenue, some skills to build your revenue as a speaker. And remember, if you're an entrepreneur or an author, you're also a speaker. You should be speaking in some way, shape, or form. So with that being said, I am your host, Altovise Pelzer, the voice coach, professional speaker, certified life coach, Amazon bestselling author and podcaster, as well as the founder of the World Voice League. Guys, the World Voice League is a community of entrepreneurs, speakers, and authors coming together to impact social change. Check us out over on Instagram at speakeasy_podcast. Check us out over on Facebook at Speakeasy Podcast 1. That part, I look forward to talking to you guys later. And until next time, guys, don't forget to press it out. See ya.